Tonight, we turn to the House floor, where the Republican majority is once again doing what it does best, handing corporate America the keys to our public lands, this time beneath the waves. H.R. 261, the so-called Undersea Cable Protection Act, landed on the floor this week, and it took Democratic Congressman Salud Carbajal of California, a veteran, a pragmatist, and one of the few adults left in that chamber to stand up and say what needed to be said. What he exposed should concern every American who believes our oceans belong to the people, not to big tech. Here's what happened.
I yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from the Central Coast of California, Mr. Carbajal.
Gentleman's recognized.
I thank the chair and I thank the gentleman for yielding. I rise in firm opposition to H.R. 261, the Undersea Cable Protection Act of 2025. On its face, this legislation may seem like a narrow procedural change, as streamlining permitting for undersea fiber optic cables. But in reality, it strips away critical environmental and economic safeguards that we and the communities we represent depend on to help power our nation's blue economy. We know that 4 of the 5 national marine sanctuaries in California generate more than $114 million a year and support over 18,000 jobs in commercial fishing alone. H.R. 261 is a giveaway to mega corporations at the expense of the American taxpayer, the oceans and Great Lakes we have advocated to protect. And some of the marine sanctuaries most at risk because of this legislation are iconic spots off the coast of California: Monterey Bay, Channel Islands, and the newly created Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. Nowhere is this more evident than in the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary, a designation that was decades in the making. First nominated by the Northern Chumash Tribe Council in 2015, the sanctuary became effective on November 30th, 2024, after review by Congress and the state of California. And now, through this legislation, my constituents and the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary will lose big. Waiving the future fees on cables from industry would cost between $2.7 and $7 million per every 20 miles each year. While there is a 2-year exception for the newly designated Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary, current law requires operators and installers of deep-sea fiber optic cables to obtain a permit from NOAA and pay fair market fees for use of these areas. I and many others here today believe we need secure, reliable telecommunications infrastructure. And I understand that the 5-year time limits on permits cause concern for companies looking for long-term certainty. However, I firmly believe that we can find a solution that protects these sanctuary resources and treats all stakeholders fairly. We can find a win-win solution that supports innovation, continues to support our local economies, and ensure the American taxpayer gets a fair return for use of our natural resources. That is why, at the appropriate time, I will offer a motion to recommit this bill back to committee. If the House rules permitted, I would have offered the motion with an important amendment to this bill. My amendment is straightforward: allow tech companies to have their alternative permitting pathway in sanctuaries, but add in a few common sense guardrails. First, allow an alternative license or permit, but require that the project be compatible with the purpose of the sanctuary. That means protecting the sensitive areas of the seafloor and avoiding cultural and historic sites. Second, require public comment, as is currently the practice with special use permits. Third, require these companies to carry liability insurance for the project. We don't want to see another disaster like we saw off the coast of Oregon. A Meta subsidiary dumping drilling fluid and drilling equipment on the sea floor, then leaving the taxpayers on the hook to clean up the mess. Yes, did I say taxpayers? Yes, they're the ones that paid. Finally, my amendment would maintain the status quo and allow NOAA to collect a fair market fee for the use of these sanctuary resources, just like any other public land management agency does for cables that cross their protected lands. These are all standard provisions for the use of public resources, and I hope we can bring back a little bit of common sense to this legislation. I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record the text of this amendment. I ask my colleagues to join me in voting for the motion to recommit and protect our marine sanctuaries for future generations. I yield back.
Without objection, gentleman yields.
Congressman Salud Carbajal, a Democrat representing California's 24th District, a man who served this country in the United States Marine Corps before he ever served in Congress, standing on the House floor, essentially begging his Republican colleagues to do the bare minimum: protect the ocean, protect the taxpayer, and hold billion-dollar corporations accountable. He wasn't asking to kill the bill. He wasn't asking to block undersea cables. He was asking for guardrails, liability insurance, public comment periods, compatibility with sanctuary protections, and fair market fees. In other words, the same basic standards we apply to anyone who wants to use public land for private profit. That's the radical Democratic agenda Republicans want you to fear. H.R. 261 would effectively let big tech, and we're talking about companies like Meta, Google, and their subsidiaries lay fiber optic cables through some of the most ecologically sensitive marine environments in the United States, without meaningful oversight, without paying fair fees, and without any real accountability when things go wrong. And Congressman Carbajal reminded us things have already gone wrong. Off the coast of Oregon, a Meta subsidiary left drilling fluid and equipment on the ocean floor and walked away. And let's not forget the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary, a designation that the Northern Chumash Tribe Council fought for since 2015, nearly a decade of advocacy, of cultural preservation, of fighting to protect waters that are sacred to indigenous communities that have called that coastline home for thousands of years. That sanctuary only became effective in November of 2024. It's barely a few months old, and already, this Republican majority is working to carve out exceptions that would undermine its very purpose. That should tell you everything you need to know about where the GOP's priorities lie. Not with tribal sovereignty, not with environmental stewardship, and certainly not with the people who fish those waters and depend on them for their livelihoods, an industry that, by the way, supports over 18,000 jobs and generates more than $114 million a year in California alone. When Republicans control the House, the answer is always the same. It works for the corporations. It works for the shareholders. It works for the lobbyists who write the bills and the executives who write the checks. Congressman Carbajal offered a reasonable, bipartisan path forward, and if passed as prologue, it will be rejected, because reason is not what drives this majority. Ideology does, donor obligations do. So the next time someone tells you that both parties are the same, remember this moment. Remember that a Democrat stood on the House floor and said, "Let's find a win-win." And remember that the Republican majority said, "No, the corporations win," and you lose. This is what's at stake in every election, in every committee hearing, in every vote that doesn't make the front page. The ocean doesn't have a lobbyist. The Chumash people don't have a super PAC. The commercial fishermen of Monterey Bay aren't bundling campaign donations. But they have a voice, and today, that voice belonged to Salud Carbajal. Whether anyone on the other side was listening, well, that's a different question entirely.